I think right now the potential of psychedelic drugs is better treatment for really severe disorders or treatment-resistant disorders, because there's really an unmet need. There's nothing we could treat some patients with. In the future, the indication for psychedelic drugs could be probably broader, and in the far future, we probably treat patients with moderate disorders or with first episode disorders with these drugs. That's their potential. But right now, I think we have to deal with establishing these drugs for severe and treatment-resistant disorders. And the outlook for psychiatry is that we could probably change the mode of thinking in psychiatry, or the mode of treatment in general, the approach we have currently in psychiatry it will probably be changed by these drugs. Our thinking in psychiatry is we believe that psychiatric or mental disorders are based on brain disorder. There's a defect or a deficit, something wrong in brain chemistry, and that is corrected by the current drugs. And the assumption is that we have to correct this disorder by continuous treatment with the currently available drugs. And with these psychedelic drugs, we probably approach mental disorders in a different way. We administer these drugs as a single treatment. Probably we repeat it after a couple of months, probably once in a year. But we change our approach to mental disorders. So we'll not be treating these disorders like disorders of chemistry, which we have to correct. The interesting thing is that it seems to help for such a huge variety of different disorders. There are indications for effectiveness in major depression, in OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder, in addictive disorders like nicotine abuse or dependence, alcohol dependence, or post-traumatic stress disorder. So there's a huge variety of disorders. Schizophrenia or psychosis in general will most likely remain a contraindication, although there are people who believe that these drugs could also help in schizophrenia, but this is a very complicated field, because currently we believe that psychedelic drugs could trigger the onset of schizophrenia. So our current thinking is that it remains a contraindication. But the range of disorders we will be treating in the future is probably very broad. That's also a very interesting question. Right now, to get a foot into the, let's say, market, I probably believe that we have to, at least from a legal perspective, we have to get our studies approved. And for doing studies, we have to convince the authorities that these treatments are safe. And this is most likely done in patients for which an unmet medical need exists, so in treatment-resistant patients. As soon as we have shown that these treatments are effective and safe, then we probably could move to the next step and start trials in, why not in first episode patients, in first episode depression. But I think that that's really a matter of the long-term future. Right now, at least in the German situation, I believe we could convince authorities, legal authorities, that patients with severe and treatment-resistant disorders are the first indication for these drugs. First, we have to do clinical trials to really demonstrate beyond doubt that these compounds are effective. There are some indications, but the knowledge base is still quite small. So we have to do large studies in hundreds of patients. And as soon as we have the data, then we can make really a decision whether these compounds are effective and safe. I think it's important to do such studies in Europe and especially in Germany, because we have Germany is one of the largest health markets, not only in Europe but worldwide. I think we have a very good health system, but we are also very conservative. So to introduce such a new treatment into such a market like Germany would be really a major step, and that could be a hint for other countries and other markets worldwide that it could be useful to use these drugs in broader patient populations. I see three hurdles. One is financing, one is approval by the federal authorities, and one is ethics committees. The ethics committee, I think, is they can be convinced easily, and that has been done by many other academic centers before. The federal authorities are especially in Germany, are very conservative, so we have to convince them, and that's a process, and it's an international process. So the more such studies are performed or conducted in other countries like the US, like UK, or other European countries, the more the German authorities will be convinced that such a study should also be done, or could be done safely in Germany. And we are in the process of convincing the authorities, the federal authorities. And the third hurdle, of course, we need money, and we need funding. These clinical trials are expensive, and they have to be financed. But this is also a hurdle which can be crossed, I'm pretty sure. I think the first step will be conducting clinical trials, and I'm sure that over at least several years, patients will have legal access to these drugs only as part of a clinical trial. So we have to do large clinical trials to make these drugs available to a large patient population, to a large representative patient population. I'm afraid that it will take several years to make these drugs available to patients outside of clinical trials. So this takes probably another 5 years or so, at least. That will be very easy. Usually in clinical trials performed by the pharmaceutical industry, the recruitment rates are low. Recruitment is very slow, so it takes a long time to conduct a clinical trial with a new investigational product by the pharmaceutical industry. For these compounds, I'm absolutely sure that there will more patients than we need who want to be part of such a clinical trial. And you don't have to advertise for these trials. There's such a public interest. I'm sure as soon as we start our trial, we will have masses of patients, huge numbers of patients who want to be included into a clinical trial. And that's what other researchers from other countries tell me. Recruitment is the smallest problem at all. the Insight Conference is is a very inspiring meeting in which brings together people from very different fields, and it covers the whole range of thinking in the field, not only neuroscience, but philosophy, culture, politics, and that makes this meeting so inspiring for me.